Morning. It's great to be in the house of the Lord, is it not? Book of Exodus, chapter 2. Book of Exodus, chapter 2. Starting in verse 11. So where is Exodus? It's the second book. Verse 11, chapter 2. One day, when Moses had grown up, he went out to his people and looked on their burdens. And he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. And he looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. And then he went out the next day, and behold, two Hebrews were struggling together. And he said to the man who was in the wrong, "Why do you strike your companion?" And he answered, "Who made you a prince or a judge over us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" And Moses was afraid and thought, "Surely this thing is known." When Pharaoh heard of it, he sought to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and stayed in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Pick up here. Last week, we looked at the birth of Moses and the subsequent placing him unto the river and him going into the household of Pharaoh, but yet quickly being returned to his mother to be nursed, and then after 3 to 5 years, depending on how long you want to date the weaning cycle amongst Hebrews, he then returns back to Pharaoh's household. And we hear nothing more of him for 40 years. Because Acts tells us that it's 40 years that this event occurs. And so in 40 years, Moses has been relatively silent. And then the text begins with, one day, Moses happens to go out and see the burdens of his people. And it's kind of a figure of speech. It's not like he's all of a sudden decided that he is a Hebrew. It's not all of a sudden that he's contemplated. There's a lot of ink spilled on whether or not and when he knew and how he knew and where he knew. It's probably a very good assumption that his mother, who weaned him, told him who he was. That's a fair assessment. We do know, according to, I believe it is also Acts, that he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh or the son of Pharaoh's daughter. And so we do know that somewhere along the line he became cognizant of exactly who he is and who he wasn't. But one day, he goes out to look at the burdens of his people. Now, you got to go all the way back to the sermon on Genesis 15. If you're new, well, we're going to go back to Genesis chapter 15. In Genesis chapter 15, God makes a promise to Abraham that the descendants are going to be sojourners, they're going to be slaves, they're going to be oppressed, they are then going to be delivered. God is going to punish the nation that oppresses them, and Israel's going to leave with all their wealth. And here, it seems like all of a sudden this plan is being put into place. The one day kind of kicks it off that Moses is beginning to understand possibly his role. Acts kind of paints that picture for you. And he kind of understands his role. He thinks that he's the guy. He's coming out, and then one day he sees the burden of his people, and he sees one of them being beaten by an Egyptian. And notice the identification in the text. He doesn't identify himself as an Egyptian, but he beat one of his own. And Moses then kills a man. Let's look at this just on a cursory basis, what it is. A great example, right here in the text, of how we go through sin. We're going to look at this text from multiple angles, but right now let's take a look at this one. Notice what he does. In the act of killing this man, let us look at what he does. He doesn't walk up and go, "I'm a member of Pharaoh's court. I possess power and authority. Stop beating this Hebrew man and let him go." So what he does. Because what he's about to do, he knows is wrong to do. What's the action he does before he kills the man? he kills the man. Have you ever noticed that when you sin, you don't get on Facebook and go, whole bunch of sinning going on here in my house. Y'all stop by and see. What's the first thing we do when we sin? We look to see who's looking, right? We all know the old joke. You know what the difference between a Methodist and a Baptist is in a liquor store? The Methodists recognize each other. It's a funny joke. I'm glad you chuckled instead of just at the thing of reading a bulletin through my sermon. Why? Because we don't announce it to the world. And Facebook's a great place for people to not announce things that they should never, ever announce. I have yet to figure out the filter on some people's Facebook things, because y'all should not post some things you post. Ever. I have friends that have no filter. She'll go, seriously? I'd take that one off. But anyhow, we never tell people when we go to sin. We never tell people when we're actually going to go. Moses is doing the same thing. Watch how Moses does things. And here's the thing. We act as though when we do this, we've covered our bases. Thinking no one will see, no one will find this out, no one will know what I have done because I did the head look. I don't see anybody. Notice what the text says here. Check this out. Seeing no one, or looking this way and that, seeing no one, he struck down the Egyptian. He gets angry, he gets mad, he looks around to see if there's any witnesses. He kills the man, and then he does what we typically like to do when we sin, and we cover it up. You ought to watch Snap. Snap is a great show. I don't think that it's on there anymore, but if you've got like the Lifetime Network or Netflix or something or other, I'm sure it's on there. You can call my wife. She has a notebook that she keeps. I swear, I think she's planning my destruction one day because she watches those shows and takes notes. So I know that if I ever come home and I'm stepping on plastic, I'm leaving. It's a joke. If you watch those shows, though, people come up with very elaborate means of disposing of the guilt or the attempted crime. Moses hides a body in sand. If you've ever been to a sandy region, do you think the evidence of a body concealed in something that blows is concealable? I mean, it's not like Jimmy Hoffa who's buried in concrete. You know, it takes a lot to get concrete to unravel. Sand, it flies so much it even gets up in the air and turns the sky blood red. I mean, it's a shift. And think about it when we go to sin and look at how we sin and how we hide the evidence. There's a couple of shows called, and little kids don't say this, but it's the Stupid Criminals. Because they do crazy things to hide what they do. Look at what Moses does. Moses kills the man. He looks around to make sure nobody's watching. He buries the body. But who do you think he forgot about knowing the crime? The guy the other dude was beating. Here's another concept too. You may conceal your sin from now until the day you die. But from whom have you never concealed your sin from? So we think he can't see. The sand covered it up. I was in my house when I committed that sin. No one can see because I had the blinds closed. Moses' action here is a lot the way we process, the way we go about these things. Moses is looking at this and says, look, I've solved this problem. I've killed this guy. You go free. Tell no one. Oh yeah, like that's not going to happen. We have a wreck right here in front of the church, and by the end of the day, I guarantee you 5 people from this congregation will post it on Facebook. There was a wreck right here in front of the church. I'd call you out by name, but, you know, Sonia. Anyhow. Anyhow, And he hit him in the sand. He goes out the next day. And two Hebrews are struggling together. And he says, what are you doing wrong? What are you doing? Why do you strike your companion? And notice why it comes full circle here. Who made you prince and judge over us? Do you mean to kill us? I don't think the guys were asking the question like, are you planning to kill us? Oh, no, I think it was more mockery. Who made you? Who are you? You're a murderer. Are you going to kill us too? You going to cover up the crime and kill us too? Moses was afraid, and he said, surely this thing is known. And then we know Pharaoh has found out. And now Moses ends up in the land of Midian. You go, great. You got to remember the plan, right? The plan is that the children of Israel will be wandering in captivity and oppressed for 400 years. The text tells us last week that up comes this baby Moses, and if you've read ahead in the book of Exodus, he's kind of a big deal. So there's this plan that's in motion that God has put into motion, not in Exodus chapter 1, but way back 400 years or more in Genesis chapter 15, that this is the plan that's in motion, and up comes the deliverer, and he grows up to be a 40-year-old man, and according to Acts, he believes that what he's doing is a means by which he's going to deliver people. I don't really understand how you plan to deliver people by killing a guard, but okay, rock on. Anyhow, so he thinks he's the deliverer, and he's got this plan, and yet it doesn't work out. He now has to go into the land of Midian into hiding. And when you look at how God unfolds plans, have you ever wondered, what are you doing? This is such an easier way to do this. You look at the plan in which God has for the children of Israel here. He goes, look, Abram, I've promised you this land, but you're not going to get the land. I'm not going to give it to you until your children 400 years from now, they're going to get the land. Okay. Tell me when the good part gets here. Okay. Well, they're going to wander for a while in a land that's not theirs. Okay. Then they're going to be slaves. Okay. Then I'm going to oppress them. Not really sure about that part. Then I'm going to punish the people that oppress them. Okay, that's cool. And they're going to leave wealthy because the Amorites' time has not been complete. When we look at that, there's a simple way to do that. How about you just kill the Amorites now and let Abraham get the land, and the children of Israel just start their nation building right there in Canaan, and pow! Easy! See, that's how we think. We look at the plans and we go, there's an easier, God, this is point A, and you tell me you want me to be there. There's point B. How about we just draw a straight line, and we'll walk it. But if you look at how the plan unfolds, in God's timing, it seems like the plan goes over here for a little bit, and then it comes, and it almost seems like, and I'm sure that none of you have ever had this question, are you even aware? Do you know what is going on down here? Here, let me help you out. You seem to have a lot on your plate. So I'll help you out, and then when I need your help, I'll call on you and you help me out, okay? You're like air support. When I need you, I'll need you. I'll call for fire. And then we'll move out. Notice this is not an uncommon habit in the Old Testament. Abram, you're going to have a son. Remember when that individual tells that to Abram, it was so funny that even Sarah chuckled. And then along, Abram starts looking at himself, and he starts looking at Sarah, and he goes, we're getting kind of up here in age. Actually, we're past the age of bearing children. We'll help God out. So Abram sleeps with his handmaidens, and all of a sudden out comes Ishmael. And what does God say? Hey, thanks for the assist, but no. Thanks for trying to help me out, but no. I have a purpose and a plan. And notice what happens. In that purpose and this plan, here comes Isaac. And then as Isaac's tooling along, notice what God does. Hey, Abram, I want you to take Isaac, and then I want you to kill him. Along the lines about this way, typically most American Christians will be looking at this and like going, huh? Wouldn't this be so much simpler if when I was earlier, I just had kids and I named one of them Isaac? It works. See, the timeline goes this way. See, we don't have to do all this. And actually, though, the point, in fact, is actually we do. See, we prefer things that are easy. We are the path of least resistance individuals. A lot of times, if you've ever been in the army, we prefer the easy wrong over the hard right. We like easy. And we really put a lot of emphasis upon easy. But if things come to you easy, do you have an appreciation for what God has done? The fact is, no. It requires a great deal of faith for Abram to sit and wait for the heir that God has promised. It requires a great deal of faith for Abram to take that child into the woods and look at the slaves and say, I and the boy will return, and go and almost plunge the knife within his chest. It requires a great deal of faith for Israel to go through this Holocaust that they are having at the hands of the Egyptians. Moses is now brought up, and the text here doesn't reveal it, but Acts 7 kind of does, that he is the deliverer, and all of a sudden he's decided he's going to help God deliver Israel with his own hands. And notice in Genesis chapter 15, God didn't say, I'm going to need help punishing that nation. He has a script. He has a plan. Your help isn't. He has got this under control. Moses laying in the river as a basket, as a baby boy, vulnerable to the world, could have easily have drowned had it not been for the hand of providence guiding that basket and Pharaoh's daughter to a meeting point. Moses didn't swim that basket over to that woman. Moses' mom didn't put that basket in there by chance. Too many coincidences for it to be chance. And the plan, though, Moses, you messed this up. Really? Moses goes away. Acts tells us that in Midian he's there for 40 more years. Now, why would he do that? Remember the last part of Genesis chapter 15. What must occur before the children of Israel can leave Egypt? The time for the Amorites must be what? Completed. We look at this and go, man, Moses, you've screwed this up. You've messed this up. You know, you were in Pharaoh's household. You could have led a military, and this is how we think about it. Think about it. And the way we look at delivering nations today, the way we look at delivering nations is we either send them a ton of food, or we send Marines, or we send the 82nd Airborne, or we send some type of trigger puller that goes in and says, you can't shoot these people anymore. The way we would look at delivering people like this, and it kind of worked itself out in that movie called Gods and Generals or Gods and Kings. I have yet to see it. When it pops up on Netflix, I may watch it when I need some sleep. Because apparently in that movie, Moses is an insurgent leader, and they had like commando teams. I don't read it in that book, but hey, rock on. The way we would look at it is, it made it so much easier if Moses, with a select few of elite commandos, snuck into Pharaoh's palace and took command, seized control of the government in a coup d'etat and said, I'm taking over this place and we're all going to own it and we're all going to be in charge. That's the way we would look at these things. That's not how it's going to work out. If you look at how it works out, a guy who has to flee from Pharaoh, who has to wait for that guy to die, then come back, and he smells like shepherd because he's been around a bunch of sheep, is going to come back and deliver these people out as a more of a humble means than simply as a great military leader. So we look for that wowing kind of leader, and yet what the plan has is Moses ended up sitting in Midian by a well. That isn't by accident. So we look at the plan and we go, I'll help God out. And in so doing, I'm going to help out the plan. In fact, the matter is, Moses won't go into Midian unless Moses tries to help God out, because the only way he's going to get out of Egypt is if someone wants to kill him, i.e. Pharaoh. And so off to Midian he goes. Why would God do that? I have sat at times after great tragedies, and then sometimes even great victories, and as you go through, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, maybe you have, as you're going through it, you're like going, you have got to be insane. Seriously. Do you not see the problem I'm in? And then I get to the other side, and I look back and go, oh, what a spoiled idiot I was. How childish I have become. Because while I'm going through it, all I see is the stuff around, but then on the other side, I look back and I see every incident that one could prescribe as being coincidental and have no bearing on anything else, and yet, click, 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 it falls into place. I was supposed to go to the advanced course long before I went to the advanced course. I didn't go. When I was at the advanced course, I ran into this tall dude that has a weird affect that when he talks about people dying, smiles. And he stands about this tall, and most of you know him. He's Jim Fisher. Had my time not been delayed at the advanced course, I would have never met Jim Fisher. And Jim Fisher would never have known about me. And barring anything else, I wouldn't be here. Those are random things. If you were to talk to an atheist on the street, that is a random activity. But yet if you look back and see the sovereign hand of God, how he works all those things out, and in the midst of all that, while I was looking at all that, I go, man, I don't understand why I can't get what I want. Well, actually, I've got a plan for you. You're going to get exactly what you want. You're just not going to get it the way you want it. But you're going to get exactly what you want. And when you're done, you're going to look back and go, wow, what a plan. I would never have planned it that way, but I now see the wisdom in the plan. See, we look at what Moses is going on and how God is going to deliver his people, and you have a man in a crucial position. He is in Pharaoh's household. He has the ear of Pharaoh. He has the ability to get things done for the Jews, and then he screws it up by killing one. The plan's over, it's ruined. I have never read in the text where God in heaven goes, oh, jeez, I'm so tired of fixing. I won't chase that rabbit. I'm so tired of fixing this plan. I just wish these people would just stop helping me. Moms, have you ever been in the kitchen? At the end of the day, you're cooking, and you've got kids that want to help you, and they're trying to help you, and they're trying to help you, and they're trying to help you. And finally, the decree from mom, she's had all she has, and she finally says, stop helping me! Get out! I don't think God ever does that. I don't think God's plans get so frustrated by us. He just stop helping me. I've got it fixed. Finally, let's look at it from another direction. Acts tells us that the reason why Moses goes out to do this is that Moses believes that he is going to be the deliverer. And he goes out and he kills the Egyptian, and he tells him, basically, when he comes up to him and says, hey, why are you smacking around each other? Basically, ta-da! I'm the guy here who's going to deliver you. Ta-da! No one told everybody else except you, Moses. And so he goes out and he does this thing in an attempt to be the deliverer, and then goes and sits in a desert for 40 more years. It's kind of indicative when we get there. I won't give you much because you won't show up those Sundays for these sermons. I know how you people are once you get the read ahead. But when he is sent back to the people of Israel, notice one of the questions he asks. Who am I to tell, or what evidence shall I present that I've come from you? If he tried to deliver Israel by his own strength, as Acts kind of indicates, then, and you have the two Jews going, who are you? Are you a prince? Are you a judge? Are you going to kill us too? When I return and go, hey, I'm Moses, the guy that killed that Egyptian and fled, that's going to carry about as much weight as a lead balloon. Who shall I say sends me? They're going to want proof. And what does God tell him? You tell them I am who I am has sent you. But not only that, he's also wanted for murder. And so he goes, okay, well, when I go to see Pharaoh, and there's much more to the story, I won't ruin it for you. This is just a little taste. So show up those Sundays. Who or what shall I do to convince Pharaoh? Pharaoh's a powerful man. And at that event, God gives him the things to say to the children of Israel, and God gives him the abilities with his staff to throw it down. It becomes a serpent. That would freak me out alone in itself. And he goes back. You say, so what? Well, let's look at this just from a very practical means. If you look and just boil the text down to just nothing more than what it is, you have the perfect anatomy of a sin. You have the perfect anatomy of an individual who he does this. And I'm sure none of you have ever done that. I'm probably the only one in the room that does that. You know, this is how I do when I'm about ready to buy another firearm. I try to buy Monday through Friday because guess where she's at? There you go. It's all an attempt to give a gun a loving home. I'm just kidding. But we do that, right? In the anatomy of a sin. So we look all directions, then we try to conceal the sin, and we think that we've hidden the sin, and all of a sudden the sin's found out. And instead of admitting to the sin and taking the consequences for the sin, what do we do when the sin's found out? We run. If you just look at it basically that, you simply have that. But there's more behind that text than just simply a man killing a man. You have this plan that God has put into play, that God is working through time, that God has promised 400 years before, that is moving forward in a manner in which if you were to plan it, you go, I would never plan it this way. I would never do it this way. I would do point A, point B, point C, point D, point E, point F, and it would be logically carried out in our logic. And you see this plan that is slowly being put into place, that at every moment that it seems to be a purpose of derailment, all male children are to die. Derailment. Moses, our protagonist, kills a man and now goes off to Midian. Derailment. Are all essential parts of the plan because it puts Moses in Midian where he's going to encounter God at the burning bush. We have this plan that is working through time, but what happens is we get so focused on how we can help the plan as opposed to simply seeking God in the midst of the plan. We grow impatient with the plan. Some of you are suffering or have gone through some terminal illness, and as you've gone through it, you grow impatient in the suffering. You grow impatient in the waiting, and in that you would do anything to speed that process up. But in that slow, painful wait, you have that opportunity to rest solely upon the grace and peace of our Lord and Savior, because that is the greatest strength you're going to have during that time. And how quickly we run from that and begin to change or try to change the plan. Finally, towards the end, we see that what appears to be derailments are nothing more than the hand of providence leading this plan to its full conclusion. If we were to make this plan, it would have a totally different look. Much like the way in which Christ enters into the world. If I were going to redeem mankind, I would not send a child to be born in a backwater town in a manger. The wise men, when they came looking for the Redeemer of the world, went to a palace, because that's where kings are made. If I were to create a plan to redeem mankind, I wouldn't have the child then be sought to be killed by chance in case he did get captured, to be killed, and have him flee into Egypt until the king had died. If I were to build a plan to redeem mankind, I certainly wouldn't have him working as a carpenter for 30 years until he begins his ministry. And certainly wouldn't have him wandering around the countryside doing all that he did. See, if I were to do it, he would be an authoritarian figure from the beginning. Pow! I'm the man! That's how our thinking takes us. I certainly would never have him executed. Notice how the plan of God is uniquely different than ours. Moses comes into the world in a very humble means. He then goes into the river, and he is then pulled from the river, and then he goes into Pharaoh's household to where he can learn all the great stuff that he needs to learn, and then he runs in order to come back to be the deliverer. He delivers Israel in spite of all of his failings. You look at how Christ comes into the world. He comes into the world through very humble means. He enters in of a virgin girl into a manger, flees to Egypt, and lives a very humble existence. He dies upon a cross for the crimes of you and I, and delivers his people through his death, burial, and resurrection. If I had planned it, it would have never been planned that way. Praise God, I wasn't in charge of the planning matrix that day. Because the only way that satisfies a sinful heart, or satisfies the penalty of a sinful heart, is the blood of an innocent being. And Christ comes to take our place upon the cross to deliver us from the consequences and the penalties of our sin. So before we go and help God out with the plan, let us look at the plan that he brought into existence that brings us our redemption, that redeems us from the hand of not an oppressive king, but of a wicked tyrant whose sole purpose is to ensure our destruction. If you're here today and having a clue as to who Jesus Christ is, or why he would come in such humble means to die upon the cross for your sin, and be here at the front, my microphone will be turned off. It'll be one sinful individual talking to another about the grace and love of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. If you've been coming for a while to Skyline and say, I'd really like to be a part of the family of believers here, I'd really like to join the fellowship, again, I'll be here at the front. As the praise band comes and sings, if you will stand.